Good morning, everyone. My name is Jimena Almendares, and I was most formerly the Chief Product Officer at OkCupid, leading product, design, app development, and other teams. And the reason that I'm here to talk with you today is because indeed, we're gonna talk about the lies that we tell ourselves and how can we use data to build products that humans like. So first, a little bit of an intro. I started getting super interested about understanding humans because if you can hear it from my accent, I'm from Mexico. And then my life took me to work in many different places. Many times I just didn't speak the language. So I kind of became an expert at stepping back and just observing people and understanding patterns and what were people, the things that they would do that would give me a little bit more of a clue about what they were thinking. And that actually became a big factor in my life in terms of, you can get data, and with data, you can actually see what are people doing as an aggregate, and also figure out if you're thinking now about flows, where are people stuck? And basically, then you can think about a UX solution to make them get through that flow better. And the other one is people insights. We all work in tech, and we have a lot of data, right? And I had the fortune of working at huge companies in terms of loads of users. What I think that was really interesting to me is that users are actually humans. And when you step back and you think about how do they think about relationships, what are the things, the events they want to go to, what are the things they want to learn, and now about OkCupid, who are they? And they tell us all these raw things, and we see all these interactions about actually who could they even spend their life with. That's when it really gets really interesting because you get into the wants and needs of humans. So I'm actually going to share with you 3 big lessons that I learned from online dating, so you don't need to work on online dating to actually get them. And the first one, and super big one, is that what people say isn't always what they do or what they want. And first, let's start. Online dating actually can be like a marketplace. There's supply, basically you or us, and we're like there, and we say, these are the things that we come with, gender, location, etc. And this is what we demand, right? There's a part that is really important, example, gender, orientation, age, location, and all these other things. And you would think that what people ask us is really what they want, right? Like that's the person that we are going to show them. So I'm going to take an example. It's going to be age, and in this case, it's straight women. And when you ask them, it might actually not show very well, but it's the gray line. It's basically their age, and there's going to be a range. What is going to be the maximum age that they're willing to date, and what's going to be the lowest? So you basically get to a point where there's a 10 years range, right? So that's the people they're saying, like, I would go out with this person. But what do they do? I actually, with data scientists, we looked into who are women searching, who are they messaging first, proactively, without even that person knowing. And it turns out that this is who they're messaging. And what is really fun is that women turn out to be less picky than they usually put on their profile. So it's really weird, right? Because it turns out that things are much more flexible than we actually thought. And what about men? Well, this is for straight men. It turns out that they're pretty much like robots in terms of just having a pretty straight line just a little bit above their age. But when it turns about who would they date on the lower boundary, it's much more flexible. Well, that's actually what they say, but now what do they do? This is what they do. It actually means that there's pretty much they're super flexible, and a guy 60-year-old would always think that a 20-year-old is pretty hot. But now, I have a marketplace that I need to take care of, right? So what do I do with it? Well, there's going to be parts where there's really no overlap. I cannot match these people. And in the middle, we had the starting range of what were the constraints that I had in my marketplace. But it turns out that if you actually look at the behavior patterns, you can actually unlock much more supply and demand than what there might be. So, key insight, it might not be the first recommendation you present, but over time, you can be much more flexible about people that you're suggesting based on all this data, because it turns out that age is kind of flexible too. And just like age, there's many other requirements where people think that they start somewhere. Think about it, when you're buying something, there could be a price and you're like, okay, $5, a little bit more, it doesn't matter. There's that flexibility. Second lesson is that we started talking about marketplaces. Let me get you a little bit into system dynamics. That's kind of like the nerdy part of me. And the first part is that you have factors in a marketplace. We talked about location, and then you have how do people behave. So let's talk about location. This is really fun. So here, let me first explain you what we mean by attractiveness. Attractiveness, it actually can be a score. Think about when you're swiping right or left, that's votes, right? So how many yeses over nos does a person get? You can get to a score. You can get to a personal score, but you can also get to an average for, say, a state. And then you can do that also for the whole country. So what is the inside? Here, hot, I mean, basically red is the hottest, so we should all move to Montana. And that pretty much also says that one of the lowest attractiveness ratings is in California and New York City, so we're pretty much screwed. But what is really fun, there's gonna be two takeaways from this. One, it's because it's local markets, they relate to supply and demand, right? It basically means that when there's less supply, demand is very flexible. So in Montana, when they're in front of like the profile, they're like, pretty good, I guess, yes. And here, it's like, oh, bad teeth, no. So that's one thing, but the other one about marketplaces and being local, it's that there's no competition between Montana and California. Basically, it just means that in California, people are more picky, and that's the average. And that's what it's really interesting about behavior now. So when we're now talking about behavior in a marketplace, there's going to be very interesting ways in which people act. Example, no matter what their orientation is, men message more than women do. And so now when you're thinking about a product, you need to think about what are you going to engineer so that based on those factors and those behavioral patterns, you make people do what you want them to do. And an example is that I created the system dynamics model for OkCupid, and basically it was thinking about what are viral loops that I can create an engagement loop so that someone does something and that creates a whole ripple effect throughout the product. And one of the key insights that we found was that when people answered at least one question, the retention really increased. The problem was that on the left-hand side, you see the questions as they were before. It was a very complex UI, but then we actually created a game where you could answer questions like yes, no, etc. And that would give you would have it in onboarding and also as another game. And it turns out that as soon as we put it out, we increased retention by 21%, which was a big deal. But if you think about it, it's not that difficult. Now people had a matching percentage, so when they were presented to someone else, it was not 0, it was 80%, and then now people were messaging them more. So that's what I think is really key when you're thinking about behavior. It's what are people doing and how can you help them? And in our case, this questions part was somewhere far away in the product, and it was very complex, so we just basically made it much more simple and more like a game mechanic that then people really liked. It turns out that people love answering questions about themselves. In general, you wouldn't know that, but people answer at least 150 questions, with sometimes people answering like thousands of questions. The final lesson is that people are complex, and they can be lazy or superficial, so you need to help them out with that. And what can you do? One, show uniqueness. This is an example of the profile we had before, and as you see, there's a lot of data, and you would have to do a lot of research to see if you like this person or not. So what I basically told the teams was, let's present information in a simple way, right? You're going through the supermarket and you'll say like, oh yeah, that's a flavor that I like. And you don't need to turn it around to start reading about calories to see that you're potentially interested. So we did it a bit more simple. And the part that was the most important is what you see actually on the right-hand side, which is that we provided a point of view. So for instance, given that now we had all these questions information, we could say, oh, you guys have super compatible in sex, but politics is not really what's going to make you be a good couple. So at least now when you're going on a date, you know that you shouldn't talk about politics. It's difficult nowadays. And the other one, it's a point of view. So we could aggregate people and have traits. So we would have like, this person is more outgoing, this person like the outdoors, more so than people in their same age or gender. So at least we were saying, this is what the person is saying, here's how this person relates to you, but also here is how we can compare this person to others. So when you're choosing between, who do you want to go on a date, you can have all these tools at your service. And the final one is distributing attention. Imagine like an Airbnb. There's some that are basically booked the whole times. There's things also on Amazon that are also being sold more than others. Similar when you're thinking about who do you want to date. When you're in front of a person, sometimes we can be very picky. We're like, this person versus the infinite number of people, I don't know if I can make the choice. But at the same time, there's some people that are more popular than others. So what we did was to think about how to make selections that would be more narrow. And we introduced something that we call flavors versus the vanilla, where it was just like no specificity. And we created playlists, example, hardcore cuddlers, that would be people that were tattooed on the outside, but actually very sweet on the inside. We had kinky nerds that did extremely well, and others. And the idea was that we gave them 10 people every day, and now instead of this person, when you're going through a normal vanilla interaction, you would just be like this person versus an infinite. It would be like this person versus these 10 people. And it turns out that people started voting much more, and now you had at least 3 over 10 votes. And what was really cool, it was the extremes. So if you think about the whole universe of people, we had more people on the edges that were getting more interactions. And now when you think about, this is just an example of one interaction, but when you're really thinking about ecosystems, you can then think about how do I improve my company, my business, and I can use those insights, whether it's for onboarding or growth or engagement, monetization, but basically you can do so much with this information about what humans want. So in our case, things work out. We had an IPO in 2015, but really what I wanted to give you was those parting words that using data, it's not about the data itself, because who cares about numbers, but it's really about those little pieces of gold mine information that allows you to understand the deep desires that new humans can have, and with that type of information, you can create new insights that give you new opportunities. So, whatever your industry or challenge is, you can learn, iterate, and don't settle for vanilla. Thank you.